The previous picture, also shown as I've done a few times before on this opening slide and a little bit of a softer version, soft edges, is of a conversation I had with Michael Porter at the Harvard Business School. He's a professor, a very legendary, frankly, Professor Michael Porter at the Harvard Business School. It was a fun and interesting get-together at Harvard Business School, and I gathered as much data on his work on strategic management and organizations as I could while he engaged me on topics of international business and global supply chain management. Well, that's my soft tie into this session on data collection methods and collecting data more generally. Soft, nevertheless, a cool connection, I think. Well, let's start off with some overview of data collection methods and some examples in particular. The basics of data collection methods include primary and secondary data. As I mentioned, now we're going to dig deeper. Primary data collection involves gathering fresh, original data directly from sources through surveys, interviews, observations, or experiments tailored to specific research needs. Secondary data collection involves using existing data gathered by other entities, such as government reports, industry studies, or academic research to support whatever new analysis we want to do. We're going to make the primary versus secondary data collection much more detailed shortly, but the easiest way to start the session is with some examples. Oftentimes I start with content and then weave in examples or have examples on a particular slide as we go. But let's kick it off with examples and companies right off the bat to get this one going a little bit better. Coca-Cola frequently conducts primary data collection to understand consumer preferences and tastes in different international markets, as we would expect. So for example, when Coca-Cola entered the Chinese market, we mentioned that a little bit before, it conducted extensive taste tests and surveys to understand local flavor preferences. They adjusted their product formulations and marketing strategies based on the insights gathered from these studies to better cater to the local palate. Nike conducts primary data collection through interviews, focus groups, and surveys with athletes and consumers around the world. For instance, before launching a new line of running shoes in Japan, Nike might conduct in-depth interviews with local runners to understand their specific needs and preferences. This data helps Nike design products that are tailored to the unique demands of different markets, enhancing their competitive edge. Unilever, to move to Unilever a little bit, often engages in ethnographic research to observe and understand how consumers use their products in different cultural contexts. For example, when Unilever introduced new personal care products in India, they sent researchers to spend time in consumers' homes to observe their daily routines and product usage. This first-hand observation provided Unilever with valuable insights into consumer behavior and cultural practices, informing their product development and marketing strategies. Procter & Gamble or P&G utilizes secondary data, on the other hand, from market research reports and industry analysis to inform their international marketing strategies. For example, P&G might access reports from market research firms like Nielsen or Euromonitor to understand market trends, consumer demographics, and competitive landscapes in emerging markets, such as, for example, Brazil or India. These reports provide P&G with valuable insights without the need for primary data collection. Oftentimes we can start with secondary data and see what we can get out of it and perhaps tack on primary from a cost efficiency standpoint. Starbucks often relies on secondary data from government and trade publications to assess the viability of entering new international markets. There's a wealth of data on every country out there from a lot of different sources, and that's a nice way to start for Starbucks. But for instance, before expanding its presence in Southeast Asia, Starbucks may review economic reports, trade statistics, and demographic data published by local governments and trade associations. This information helps Starbucks evaluate market potential, economic stability, and consumer purchasing power. And then the last one is Apple, for this particular slide at least. Apple leverages secondary data from online databases and academic research to guide its international marketing efforts. For example, Apple might use data from sources like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, or IMF, or even academic journals to understand macroeconomic indicators, technological adoption rates, and consumer behavior trends in various countries. This secondary data helps Apple identify market opportunities and tailor its products and marketing campaigns accordingly. As promised, we're going to do a 20 by, not 20 by 20 by 20, but we're going to do 20 times 3 to build our toolkit that we're trying to build for the International Marketing Research course. So we'll start with 20 on this particular slide. And that's a promise that I sort of gave myself as well as you. So as promised, I included a top 20 list of primary data collection methods. There's so many on this slide that I decided to make 2 columns and a little bit more art oriented, I guess, than normal, with a little bit of a slant to go it. The slide has the basic description of each type, and most are self-explanatory, but having these options in one place, I think, is part of that toolkit that I like for us to build and that I want to create for each of you, that you can take with yourself and perhaps use in the future when you're conducting international marketing research. So we got surveys, we got interviews, we got focus groups, observations, experiments, diaries, journals, mystery shopping, case studies, panels, social media listening, mobile research, community-based participatory research, visual methods, projective techniques, Delphi method, longitudinal studies, event-based data collection, web analytics, gamification, and community engagement platforms. And you got my little tidbit or Cliff Note version of what each of them means. So I don't see the need to talk through all of those, partially because they're not internationally oriented per se, they're just marketing research oriented. And I'm venturing to guess that you've had some of these in other classes, but I do want them as part of our toolkit, and I do want them on the slide for that particular purpose. And we're going to do similarly for secondary data sources for international marketing research. So as promised, I also have 20 secondary data sources for international marketing research. I'm not reading these off like I did with the primary data collection methods. I see no need for that, but partly because these 20 are just a very small number of data sources available online and in various databases for secondary data that you can get. I like all the ones I included, but especially Global Edge, which we developed at the MSU Broad College of Business. Global Edge has a tagline of your source for global business knowledge, globaledge.msu.edu. So check that out when you have leisurely time to look at secondary data sources. And then the other sources on this slide, take them out for a spin as well. There are lots of good ones here, but like I said, this is a very small sample of secondary data sources. I just like these ones to be shown as a part of the toolkit. Without integrating well-functioning global supply chains, and this is a little bit of my self-serving interest, I think international marketing cannot be leveraged and done appropriately without also integrating global supply chain activities and operations. So without integrating well-functioning global supply chains into international marketing strategy making and implementation, marketing cannot achieve optimal effectiveness and efficiency, at least to me. This particular clip talks about global supply chains and some of the supply chain's characteristics. So let's listen in.
No matter where we are born and grow up in the world, we're taught at a very young age to organize our daily lives into smaller pieces, often in a sequential way based upon time increments. This instruction is most often carried out in an informal manner, first by our parents, elementary teachers, then perhaps by sports coaches, music instructors, other activity leaders. The idea is that breaking down projects into parts or simple steps will make us focused, efficient, and effective in completing tasks. In contrast, organizations involved in global supply chains cannot be involved in all aspects of the full global supply chain. Rather, supply chain professionals are generally involved in just one or a few links and connecting nodes of a global supply chain. Now, global supply chains are not just transportation systems. They're total value systems that work best if all aspects of the chain, links, resources, connecting nodes, are strategically leveraged. For the global supply chain, the idea is to work toward helping the total chain to succeed, not toward maximizing the success of an individual organization in the chain.
I like that supply chain example because it talks about the give and take, implicitly talks about the give and take as well of what goes on in supply chain and perhaps what marketing and the marketing ecosystem is all about around that supply chain. Well, here's another 20. So we did 20 primary data collection, 20 secondary data collection, at least samples. Go with the secondary samples. The 20 for primary data collection, go with them as a strong part of the toolkit. This could be a relatively strong part of the toolkit too, on a sample of technological tools for data collection. So virtually no one, person or corporation, collects data on paper anymore. That potentially biases the results, as we mentioned, but the cost effectiveness of using some form of technology is just simply too valuable. These are some of the favored technological tools for data collection, not just for international marketing research, but again for marketing research, I think more generally as well. And I seem to be on a top 20 path there, like I said. So we got 20 of these. There are 10 bullet points, but there are 2 for each. So there are 20 tools on this slide in 10 different categories. So that means, of course, we're adding another 20 options in addition to the primary data collection, as well as secondary data collection. So now we got 20 plus 20 plus 20 things here. For us to kick off online surveys, we're talking about platforms like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. They're incredibly well known. Qualtrics is everywhere, it seems like, especially in the academic world these days. That both of them allow researchers to create and distribute surveys globally, gathering responses from diverse demographics. These tools offer features like multilingual support and advanced analytics as well, facilitating comprehensive data collection and analysis. For web analytics tools, obviously Google Analytics, but also Adobe Analytics provide insights into website traffic and user behavior. These tools help researchers understand international customer preferences and behaviors by tracking metrics such as page views, time on site, conversion rates, and so forth. Social media monitoring tools like HotSuite and BrandWatch enable the monitoring of social media conversations across different countries and languages. They provide insights into consumer sentiment and emerging trends, helping marketers tailor their strategies to various international markets. As for mobile data collection apps, these apps like Survey CTO, Kobo Tollbox, a little hard to say for the Swedish guy, both are designed for data collection in the field, even in areas with limited internet connectivity. They're useful for gathering on-the-ground insights in international markets, supporting offline data entry and real-time syncing when online. Customer relationship management, CRM, has been around for a long time. Systems related to that could be Salesforce, tremendously influential, I guess, at least in the United States. HubSpot, CRM, both of them help businesses manage and analyze customer interactions and data across different regions. These systems provide a comprehensive view of international customer relationships, supporting targeting or targeted marketing efforts. Web scraping tools like Scrapy or Scrapey, depending on how you want to say it, a beautiful soup as well, allow researchers to extract large volumes of data from websites. Web scraping and trying to make sense of data, that is tremendously important in the way we collect data as well now. They can be used to gather competitive intelligence, market trends, and customer reviews across different international markets. Big data analytics platforms, tools like Apache Hadoop, with my Swedish slant to it, and IBM Watson Analytics. Both of them can process and analyze vast amounts of data from various sources. They enable researchers to uncover patterns and insights that inform strategic decisions in international marketing. Heat map tools, Crazy Egg, Hotjar, provide visual representations of how users interact with a website. These tools help identify user behavior differences across regions, for example, informing website design and user experience improvements tailored to international audiences. Online focus group platforms are incredibly valuable because we still find focus groups to be valuable, but getting the face-to-face brick and mortar may not always be as cost efficient or as available as possible. Tools like Focus Group It, user testing, facilitate virtual focus groups with participants from different countries. These platforms provide qualitative insights into consumer attitudes and preferences, enhancing understanding of international markets. And then finally, geolocation analytics tools. Geophedia, Foursquare provide location-based data and insights. They help marketers understand geographical trends and consumer behavior patterns, enabling more effective targeting and localization of marketing campaigns. And just a little bit of a disclaimer, I put 20 up here. There are others that are available. I'm not advocating for one or any of these. They're just 20 that check them out if you are in the business of doing some of these things. They could be valuable for you. So we got 20 of these as well. I think we're done with the 20 plus 20 plus 20 for this session at least. So let's move on to challenges of offline versus online data collection. As the field of international marketing research has primarily gone to some form of online data collection method in most cases, really the online versus offline data collection is trade-offs and so on have become less and not necessarily thought of as much. So I figured I would include a brief discussion of the strengths and limitations of each and add on some international considerations. That way we capture the differences at least so we know what we're dealing with. For online data collection, the strengths would be accessibility, efficiency, and flexibility. For accessibility, obviously we can reach a broad audience quickly and cost effectively. Automated data entry and analysis tools enhance speed and accuracy. For efficiency, For flexibility, it's easy to adapt and update service for different languages and cultures. As far as the limitations for online, we got digital divide, and we mentioned that as well in different contexts. Limited access in certain regions with poor internet infrastructure obviously is a problem. Response bias, there's a potential for lower response rates and non-representative samples. It's just simply too easy to ignore, as opposed to the brick and mortar face-to-face, somebody asking you questions. But nevertheless, it's so cost efficient that limitation may warrant some of the bias that we run into, sadly. Security concerns, data privacy issues, and risk of cyber attacks, obviously online. More of the privacy issues than perhaps cyber attacks when it comes to research, but we're probably getting closer to that as well. As far as offline data collection methods, the strengths are personal interaction, inclusivity, cultural sensitivity. If we go with the first one, it builds personal interaction, it builds trust and rapport, potentially increasing response rates and data accuracy. Inclusivity, it's effective in areas where with limited access, or internet access, I should say, and among populations less familiar with digital tools. And as far as cultural sensitivity, allows for a nuanced understanding of local context and customs. The limitations are pretty straightforward also. It's resource intensive, time consuming, and costly most of the time in terms of travel and logistics, and even printing paper at some point in time. But that's a lesser of the ones I mentioned. Data entry errors, high risk of manual errors during data transcription and processing. Obviously, we can double and triple check that and perhaps get away from it. But if we're talking about big data collection on paper and then inputting it, yeah, then we're running into these errors that are probably more than just casual ones. Scalability, challenging to reach large or geographically dispersed population efficiently with the offline brick and mortar version. If we go a little bit on the international context considerations, talk about developed countries, developing countries, and cultural factors. As far as developed countries, online methods are generally, as would be expected, more feasible due to the high internet penetration and digital literacy. For developing countries and less developed as well, offline methods may be more reliable considering infrastructure limitations and varying levels of digital access. And in general, cultural factors, tailoring methods to respect local customs and communication preferences is again crucial for both online and offline approaches. Increasingly shorter surveys are needed to obtain quality responses. We mentioned that in a few different ways, but these shorter surveys also need to be calibrated with the reliability and validity of the metrics. So checking this one out, why did the customer cross the road, to avoid filling out a long survey? Why? Well, apparently 67% of customers don't complete surveys if they are too long. That kind of goes without saying, but it's also good to know. It's almost surprising that 1/3 of the respondents actually do fill out surveys that are pretty long. Nevertheless, lengthier surveys, we become, this is cute to say, but sleepy at some point in time, and we may answer a little bit too quick for it to be relevant, and certainly not high quality data. So we got to keep that in mind when we pick the methods that we go with as well. Paying attention to what could be considered nuances in international marketing research is not nuances per se. We're talking about huge differences in results if these issues are not attended to. Understanding cultural context, study local traditions, behaviors, and social norms, collaborate with local researchers or cultural consultants. Now, we can talk about those in different contexts. So understanding cultural context, we talked about study local traditions, collaborate with local researchers. If we go to language and communication, here we want to ensure accurate translation and cultural adaptation of survey instruments. Use communication preferred by locals, such as face-to-face interviews or mobile surveys. Build a trust and rapport by training data collectors on cultural etiquette and respectful interaction. And then involve community leaders as needed or as warranted, and stakeholders more than just the customer. There are lots of different stakeholders to gain trust and support. Ethical considerations, we talk about clearly explain the purpose, benefits, and risks of the research in culturally appropriate terms, adhere to local norms regarding data privacy and participant confidentiality. And then we keep coming back to some of these equivalences. We call it data equivalence as an overriding thing, but we have measurement equivalence, sample equivalence, and construct equivalence that go under data equivalence. And for this particular one, measurement equivalence, here we have to ensure that the instruments measure the same construct in the same way across cultural groups. And we go back to pilot testing, back translation, psychometric validation to figure that equivalence out at a very high level of generalization, perhaps even stereotyping. And I find myself feeling like I stereotype when I have some of these examples, because as you've noticed by now, we're in session 6. I've had a myriad of practical and other examples, and I feel like I'm stereotyping a country versus another country, or a company versus another company, and I'm not trying to do that, but again, at a very high level of generalization, perhaps even stereotyping. Then, as a disclaimer, for example, adapting survey questions to reflect local customs and cultural references. I'm going to pick Asia. Using group discussions to gather data in societies with strong communal ties in Africa. Leveraging high mobile penetration rates for efficient data collection in South America come to mind as a starting point if you look at the very high level of generalization, even to the point of stereotyping. But at least we have a starting point for the cultural nuances that come into play. Whereas paper surveys are basically obsolete. Anything to do with mobile phones and gadgets is in vogue, of course. But mobile can be mobile with a heavy dosage of internet-based fields, or it can be app-based with a more interactive feel. I put together this slide as an overview of general mobile versus app-based research methods. In this context, we talk about mobile surveys being conducted via mobile devices to collect real-time data. And we talk about app-based data collection through specialized mobile applications designed for research purposes. With mobile surveys, it is relatively easy to reach respondents in remote or hard-to-access areas, easy for participants to respond at their convenience, and we can have rapid data collection and analysis. The challenges include varying levels of mobile phone penetration and internet access, the potential for non-representative samples due to the digital divide, and trouble ensuring secure and confidential handling of participant information. So for example, let's go back to Africa. In Africa, companies have used SMS-based health surveys for monitoring disease outbreaks in rural regions. SMS is what we typically call it in Europe and perhaps other places. Call it texting for lack of better things. In Asia, mobile surveys assessing consumer preferences in urban markets have been used. With app-based research, the advantages include being able to use multimedia and interactive elements for engaging data collection, having integrated tools for real-time data validation and correction, and the ability to tailor apps to specific research needs and local contexts. The challenges probably are numerous given what I just said of the advantages, but the challenges include higher initial investment in app development and maintenance. That's the starting point that becomes a brick wall for some companies. Tougher time, maybe to ensure that participants are willing and able to use the app. Some don't even want to download it. That's an easy brick and mortar kind of running into the brick, I should say, but nevertheless, and addressing compatibility and usability across diverse devices and operating systems. For example, in Latin America, app-based surveys were used to track consumer behavior and spending patterns, and in Europe, health research apps are used to collect data on lifestyle and chronic disease management. As usual, it's time again. We started off with some, but let's do some more concrete examples to capture a larger picture of the topic. When I use examples on one slide with no content topic attached to it, my general idea is to do a larger picture. Even though the examples are short, my general idea is to try to do a little bit of a larger picture, in this case of effective data collection. I hope it's noticeable, but there you go. I spelled it out, I guess. In general, generally, I try to go around the world with these examples, and more of that will follow in future sessions as well. Here are some examples from every continent, again, except for Antarctica. In Kenya, we're in Africa now, but in Kenya, mobile-based surveys were used to collect real-time data on agricultural practices and crop yields, helping to improve farming techniques and food security through targeted interventions. And you got the examples here because I did want to spell them out in actual words on this particular slide. In India, the National Family Health Survey employed a combination of face-to-face interviews and digital data collection tools to gather comprehensive health and demographic information across diverse regions. have to include Sweden every so often. So now we're back in Europe. The European Social Survey utilized online questionnaires to gather data on public opinions and social behaviors, providing insights into societal trends and informing policy decisions. And if you check up on Sweden at your leisurely time too, you're going to notice that we collect data in Sweden on everybody, every citizen or everybody in Sweden about everything all the time. So it's an interesting privacy concern, but it's also an interesting sort of tidbit of we have databases for everything in Sweden. In Brazil, tablet-based surveys were conducted in urban areas to collect data on living conditions and as access to public services, supporting efforts to improve infrastructure and social programs. And then finally in Australia, or Oceania as we would call the continent these days. At one point in time it was called Australia, but we're more tuned into Oceania, so we can have Micronesia and other many islands and other places, not the least being New Zealand, also included in that continent, and not have to use the Australian name, if you will, which is certainly a country as well. So in Australia, a longitudinal study on child development used a mix of online service and telephone interviews to track the progress of children over time, informing policies on education and child welfare. Collecting useless information, everybody should know is useless, but collecting useless information will not help you personalize your customer's experience. Shep Hyken's single panel comic in this case captures that sentiment incredibly well or perfectly. You asked for my height, my weight, the car I drive, and what I had for breakfast. Why? I only want to buy a hammer. We collect as much information as possible to help us deliver a better personalized experience. Bottom line, we go with the punchline takeaway again. Collecting useless information won't help you personalize your customer's experience. You're not using signaling theory to tell them a story. You are not educating them about something, product, service, or feature that you have or you do, and you're certainly not collecting valuable data. Sort of the trifecta of international marketing research that I think we can use. The first and foremost is to collect data on needs and wants and everything related to consumers and perhaps other stakeholders. The extension of that would be to educate the marketplace, and the extension of that, or in conjunction with that, would be to use signaling theory to signal certain aspects of products and services that we want to get out to potential advocates, frankly, in the future as well. So let's look at future trends. Future trends in data collection technologies and methodologies that could impact international research are always hard to predict, or any future trends for that matter. But if we talk about technologies and methodologies in particular, and certainly the former technologies. So to conclude this session on data collection as it pertains to international marketing and research, I figured I would highlight a few. Some technologies obviously are already in the works, and some may be coming. Some are in the works a little bit, so I'm highlighting the fact that they are a little bit in the works and running out there, but haven't been adopted as perhaps broadly as possible. We will, of course, see AI-driven data collection, enhanced use of artificial intelligence to automate and improve the accuracy of data collection processes. So the AI-driven data collection, the first one there on the list, is pretty straightforward. Wearable technology also exists. Obviously, it's fun and still something strange for those who wear it even, but increased adoption of wearables to gather real-time health and behavioral data across diverse populations has been seen quite a bit. But we also use it in the business school for other networking and who talks to who and what have you. Mobile data collection, of course, but growth in mobile-based data collection apps will happen, allowing for greater reach and convenience and remote access. Perhaps we get some more universal standardized apps that people are a little bit more eager and accustomed to using, that we can use for multiple purposes. We have some, but not enough. Use of blockchain technology. Everybody's trying to figure out what blockchain can do for us, but the use of blockchain technology to ensure data authenticity, security, and transparency in research is likely to become more commonplace than it is now. Big data analytics, or big data as a phrase, we've been around for a while, but not necessarily in all industries. Advanced analytics tools to handle and interpret large volumes of data from various sources, we hope will be developed a little bit better and be a little bit more sophisticated. Big data could spell information overload. So big data without sophisticated tools to figure out what's going on simply will give us cause and effect and correlation and other metrics that are significant because the data set is so large, and we don't want that to be the case. We want sophisticated tools to tease out some of those issues as well. Internet of Things is another old-timer. It's pretty much an archaic phrase these days, I think, but integration of IoT devices to collect data from multiple environments and contexts can still become a better option in the future. Utilization of satellite imagery and remote sensing technologies for environmental and geographical data collection should be used more. Enhanced natural language processing techniques for analyzing unstructured data such as interviews, social media posts, and survey responses will be obvious additions. We have many of those already. Any given one, Twitter or Instagram or you name it, feed, or X as we call it these days. For Twitter, we have those, so we can create, for any post, we can create 20 to 40 variables, but they're simply not as sophisticated as crunching data could be in this particular for this particular avenue. Application of virtual and augmented reality to simulate environments for behavioral research and immersive data collection can be a better option in many cases than other data methods. If I can have a say, perhaps better cross-cultural survey platforms that include survey tools specifically designed to accommodate cultural differences and language variations in international research would be great. We have some on the language side, with some on the culture side perhaps, but they're not as sophisticated as some of the non-international aspects of what we do. We are far past the idea of surveys being translated and back translated. That's kind of the lowest common denominator. A cross-cultural survey platform would be the way to go to kick it up a notch for the future. As with all sessions, again, I conclude with an article, and I seem to do the same reminder every time. Maybe it's my structured Swedish cultural foundation that forces me or talks me into doing the same talking points when I get to the article slide. But again, for sessions 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, we have essay assignments to go along with the sessions and the article assigned. And we're not in one of those right now. So for sessions 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, we only have the article as a complement to the asynchronous session, plus of course being covered on the next quiz. So this one is coming up on the next quiz. This one is kind of cool in the sense that we look at how people feel about paying for social media. We're still in somewhat early stages of paying for social media, but what's our willingness to do so? So as you will notice throughout the sessions, a lot of the focus is on social media and online data collection, and also online data analysis. This HBR article fits that context well, but also gives each of you a chance to think about how much you actually would be willing to pay for social media services that historically have been free. Some of you are paying for some things. You want a blue check mark this, or you want that. All kinds of options for credibility and other reasons why we're paying. A little bit better access, a little bit longer text, whatever it may be that the taste buds are for each of us. Maybe it's valuable, maybe it's not. Take a look at the article and see what the results are for the country, at least as they were when we published this article. And that is a wrap. I will start the outro music right away because my wrap is short. That's a wrap. Good luck on the quiz, and then check back for the next session.